This has been an exciting week, to say the least, with all of the drama unfolding with FTX. And many people are wondering what to do, who to trust. Can we trust anybody in this space? And, you know, getting up this morning, going through Twitter, it's like I'm about ready to mute FTX because my whole feed is just full of the FTX drama. But I'm scrolling through, and then I see a post that you had put up, Molly, and it was a video of FTX CEO Sam Bankman-Fried getting interviewed, and you said, if this doesn't illustrate the SBF is a World Economic Forum clown, nothing will. And I was like, okay, yes, this is going to be a fun conversation today. So with that background, Molly, what is your thoughts on everything that is happening here with FTX, that exchange, Sam Bankman-Fried, and what's the impact gonna be for the rest of the cryptocurrency space?
So there was always something odd about FTX in that I've kind of been in the internet technology space for a long time, and generally it takes a while to build a billion-dollar brand. It's extremely unusual for a young kid of limited means to just all of a sudden create a startup and 5 minutes later is a billionaire. That's just a very unusual way for things to play out. And it always seemed very strange that he kind of didn't really seem like a real person. Like he was going to create these billions and simply just give them away. And there was a lot of this sort of altruistic kind of agenda behind him. And he just made it look so easy. And, you know, no offense to him, but like, he's not a really articulate, charismatic guy where you could see that he kind of charmed his way into this world of finance and even banking. So I always wondered, like, there's got to be a little bit more to this story because he's just not checking off the boxes for somebody who would be a natural fit to kind of excel in the world of money. And now in the last, I don't know, 24 hours, we're seeing a lot of very suspicious connections between him. And it kind of raises the question of whether he's simply kind of a front person playing this role. And really there's some serious money behind him that is preferring to stay anonymous. If you've kind of been in the kind of crypto world for a while and understanding money, you see that like there is a fair amount of money laundering going on, and when you bring in politics and significant political donations, it almost looks a little bit like the mob, where you're kind of buying off protection and paying for certain access to people. And we've seen a lot of those connections come out in the last 24 hours that are disturbing at best, and I'm kind of curious what's going to happen, because at this point we don't really know. Is he going to get to walk because he's a protected entity, or will they sort of sacrifice him to make a point and usher in very strict regulations, specifically in the US around investing with crypto assets, and sort of claim that it's for our protection, where it was maybe orchestrated. It's
almost like he was set up, right? Like he was the good little boy, the good little puppet, right? And then
Correct.
This whole catastrophe, right? It's almost like not that it was planned, but it was inevitable at the very least, right? Like it was bound to happen. This wasn't real, right? And like you said, and it's a sensitive topic here, but the funding goes deep, and the connections go very deep, and the Twitter sleuths are already on top of it. It's definitely fun to see all of it getting exposed. And you know, there's reports that his private jet just landed in Argentina or something like that, and there was a massive hack last night of FTX and FTX US. So the way that I've put this is that essentially FTX was the cabal exchange, some would say, and whatever nefarious entities you think run the world or whatever. But it seems like he was propped up, right, only to be, and you use that word, which I think is so critical, sacrifice, which is a word that I've been using here too for a while, is that, hey guys, something's going to break here eventually. And we've been talking about the Tether stablecoin too. And so this FTX exposure, this FTX contagion is going deep, and it's spread throughout much of the cryptocurrency space. I guess, how far do you think this goes? And in my opinion, Tether is going to be the final domino. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree. And if you think back to the 2008, 2009 sort of financial crisis, it wasn't just one thing. It was like a series of dominoes that fell one after the other. First, you had Bear Stearns, then Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and then finally Lehman Brothers. I kind of see a very parallel track here where, first we had the whole Terra fiasco, and we had Celsius and Voyager, and now we're going to have FTX. I agree with you that the most significant domino to fall would likely be Tether, as USDT is such an integral part of the current crypto. And then what's helpful for me sometimes is to look at like what would be the likely outcome that someone who's very powerful in finance would want. And that, I believe, for a long time is to control the on and off ramps for crypto, because that's serious money. That's the stablecoin industry. Terra and UST kind of made this case that, like, look, we can't have these unregulated stablecoins. There's too much at risk. But relatively speaking, Terra and UST were pretty small. I do have a theory about why Terra's collapse happened at the time that it did. We could talk about that in a second. But ultimately, a way to really show that stablecoins unregulated are dangerous is to take out USDT. And that would likely create a scenario where the US government would say that only certain banks are allowed to issue stablecoins, and you have to have some kind of license. And that ties back to the Federal Reserve, and they sort of have these group of banks that are shareholders of the Fed who would get those licenses. So it would kind of create another monopoly on a big part of crypto, which is stablecoin issuance.
Yeah, so it's like stablecoin is the biggest threat to the US dollar. So they create multiple examples that inevitably are going to go bust, and they can use as those examples for them to come in and regulate and clamp down this space. Is that kind of what you're suggesting is happening? Is that, these essentially Ponzi schemes, right, are going to be used by the regulators, by the SEC, by Congress, when they're considering, oh, gee, go look, Sam Bankman-Fried endorsed one of these stablecoin bills, right, that they're thinking about passing, right? So it's like a sick joke that they're playing here against us, right? These backroom doors, everything, backroom deals, all this that's happening. Is that kind of what you're suggesting, though?
Yes, I am suggesting that some key stablecoins will be used as examples for why stablecoins need to be regulated. Yeah. And they need to have examples to get adoption. There's also going to likely need to be some significant pain on the part of consumers so that people ask for regulation.
Right.
There's one book I read a lot, and there's one book that influenced my.
Right.
There's one book I read a lot, and there's one book that influenced my outlook on all of this more than any other book by a long shot. And it is called The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, The Story of the Federal Reserve System. And we see a lot of similar things happening now, and that the banking industry acts like they're very anti-crypto. They're like, this is a Ponzi, this is reckless. The banks also spoke out against the Fed, saying that we don't want to be, regulated by this isn't necessary, but really it was their plan. So I kind of look at a lot of things through that lens, and I'm very curious how involved banks like JP Morgan have been in crypto since the beginning, and whether they're just simply creating conditions where everyone embraces JP Morgan and co. taking over crypto for our safety and protection.
Right. That's what we've been talking about too on our channel, is how all these guys have been running proof of concepts, doing tests, partnering up with Ripple and other entities going back to 2018. I mean, way back, right? Working with distributed ledger technology. But then you get Jamie Dimon out here and others that say, this is the worst thing ever. But meanwhile, they're figuring out how to open up trading desks for their clients. And so it's kind of a similar deal to when they rolled out the Federal Reserve. So and we're going to get into essentially what FTX was doing is what our Federal Reserve does, right? And we have a currency war underway. And I know you've been putting together incredible threads, incredible visuals, which I'm a visual learner, so I love the visuals that you've been putting together too, of all of these other countries, the BRICS nations, and the currency war that's underway. But I think this is the problem reaction solution that they've had planned and in motion for a while. Is that kind of the line of thinking that you're running with too right now?
Absolutely. And that's why, even though I love the idea of Bitcoin, I have a pretty strong skepticism simply because it fits right into that model of problem reaction solution. So if I had to pick a logical candidate for who's really behind Bitcoin, it would be the banking cartel who created a problem in 2008 intentionally so that they could demand people request a solution. And that's kind of that framework that we see play out.
So they create the problem, but they provide the solution that is
Correct.
not only going to maintain their control, but actually give them more control with this technology and what they are potentially going to be able to use it for.
Correct. I mean, back then, if they had tried to introduce a digital currency at a time around a banking collapse and the banks had introduced it, there would have been massive skepticism. People would have said, no, we prefer cash. We don't want this controllable, programmable money. So there's just no way they would have, society would have embraced that. So they created a very clever, and I don't know this for a fact, this is just a theory, that, they created this new sort of libertarian techie angle on it, where this is now freedom from banking. And they got a very ground up adoption from a group of people who have credibility with those who are distrustful of banks, which is libertarians, techie geeks who are not in finance, and built up this following where you have this now almost evangelical group of Bitcoin supporters who are good people. And I love the theories behind Bitcoin, but I can't get beyond not knowing who created it and why Congress, for example, is not constantly asking for the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto before they approve something like a spot ETF fund or anything like that. I mean, we saw with Tornado Cash a few months ago that the US government will ban something if they think it's connected to terrorism or other illicit crime. I don't understand why there isn't that same harping about Bitcoin, knowing Bitcoin's early reputation as being kind of used in the Silk Road and for sort of illicit stuff. But you don't hear a peep out of Gary Gensler or Congress about the identity of Bitcoin's creator. And every time I bring this up with people who are really passionate about Bitcoin, their response is, well, it simply doesn't matter. The code is so good. They can't ban Bitcoin. I'm like, apparently you don't know much about the US government. They could ban whatever they want. Back in 1933, it was illegal to own gold, which now saying that out loud seems so insane to imagine that we wouldn't be allowed to own something like that. But yes, the government will ban something if they have their own interest to protect. So that's where my little skepticism of Bitcoin comes in, is why it's not demonized more.
Well, and that's kind of what I was suggesting too, about how they have more control over this new system that they're rushing out because it's all on chain, because they can control the on ramps and off ramps. And so unless you're truly using decentralized exchanges, a truly decentralized currency, which I've been talking about how Bitcoin was not as decentralized as people were making it out to be back last year. And yeah, so we kind of developed the same thesis, I think, that you're kind of suggesting, is that Bitcoin and Ethereum were propped up. They were given to us. All these people still worship it, and they are act like they're the second coming of Christ because they invested early in Bitcoin, right? Is kind of where they're at. And it's got kind of ridiculous because, one, it's not decentralized. Two, they can easily kill your on ramps and off ramps and the ability to even run the network, just like they did in China when they shut down Bitcoin mining, right? But then they let us play with Ethereum, which is obviously had been exposed as the monopoly that Wall Street got in on early to control the cryptocurrency space.